A baseball cap in the car.
Yeah, that's what you need. One of those green visors.
You ready?
Sure, anytime.
All right, everybody. It's my pleasure to welcome Monona Rossel. She is an industrial hygienist who specializes in art facilities. And she was one of our consultants on the building. It's why the building is really safe. And it's why the art department's external reviewer said of the building that it was the only art building he'd ever been in that had adequate ventilation. Monona has a degree both in chemistry and an MFA in ceramics, and does this for a living, so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, and they also didn't mention that I'm the union rep for the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees. So I'm the safety officer, and that means, well, we've learned. How many people here are interested in theater in some way? So we have a number of you. Well, let me just clue you in a little bit about theater, film, television. If you complain about health and safety, you'll never work again. Trust me. It's much easier for them to fire you or not to rehire you for the next gig than it is to fix the problem. So what we figured out in the union is people call the office. They call me. And I go in and I discover the problem. Makes me look smart. I knew before I came in. And they don't know who called it in because I also represent something called the New York Production Locals, which is everybody. SAG and the carpenters, the costume people, everybody. And so I've shut down 9 major film locations, including Disney. So really important people hate me. It's an interesting life. And I don't know why more young people don't do it, because it's really exciting. You see, most people go into my field of safety, and they go to an administrator in a college or to an employer in a workplace, and they say, please, put these safety measures into a film. Maybe they just tell you to get lost. But in the union, I walk in, and I not only tell them what they're going to do, I tell them how many minutes they got to do it. So it's a really interesting field, and everything from Spider-Man to, I deal with pyrotechnics. I was one of the expert witnesses that defended the pyrotechnician in the Rhode Island fire where 100 people died. I've been in federal court defending OSHA. Do we know what OSHA is? Is that a small town in Wisconsin? No, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. And it's really fun. And my 9th book comes out this coming week. This one is for Wiley & Sons, and it's the first general interest book. All my other ones are textbooks, but this one is general interest. And they picked the title. It's called Pick Your Poison. And it's about all the terrible practices that go on in this country in terms of the lack of testing of chemicals. Because you see, people think, oh, well, they've got a label on this product, it says it's safe, somebody must know. I got news for you, they don't know. They don't know. They tell you they do, but they don't. There's a organization called the Chemical Abstract Service. And what it does is it combs all the literature, everything about chemicals, and whenever they see a new chemical has been invented, they assign it a number so that they can now collect all the information about that chemical under that number. Last year, they registered their 50 millionth chemical. If you go on their website, type in Chemical Abstract Service, homepage, bingo, you will see a counter going up. They're at 56,800,000 some now, chemicals. Do you know how many chemicals worldwide have been assessed for their ability to cause cancer? Under 1,000. We don't know anything about the chemicals that are being invented and put in your products today. We absolutely don't. So you get all these nice labels, all these things telling you, oh yes, it's safe, we've tested it. No, they've tested it maybe for whether it does the job, but they have not tested it for whether or not it will cause you harm down the line, because they don't know. So that's the problem that we're in. Oh, look at this. This was where we were training, so we've got all kinds of schmutz all over that board. If you look at the yellow sheet, you've got a yellow sheet there, that some of you, that lists an outline. That's what we covered in training this morning. That's the kinds of things that people need to know in order to teach either art or theater safely. It's a lot about agencies. I'm not expecting that we're going to go over all of that, but I want you to see what kind of subject matter is really necessary to do a decent job, and to also be able to protect your students and teach them what they need to know. It's a very, very complex world we live in. So how many people here paint in some way or want to paint? Okay. How many people here are interested in printmaking? Okay,
That works.
Oh, it does, good. Okay, not many. How many people here might be interested in makeup in theater one day? Makeup and costuming. Got a couple. Okay. Anything else people are interested in? Welding. Got some welders here? Okay, so I know where they are. And general sculpture? A woman, good. Good, good, good. Mazel tov. Okay. Well, those are all interesting fields. And we have, in every one of them, you can't make the sculptures out of Nerf. You can't do these paintings with non-toxic stuff, because it doesn't work that way. In order to create art, you have to hurt the environment, whether you like it or not. One of the reasons is, if you're going to make paintings that are going to last for a couple hundred years, they can't fade. And to do that, you've got a limited number of pigments. And some of them will contain lead, some of them will contain cadmium, chrome, cobalt, all kinds of toxic metals. There's some organic chemicals in there too that also work like dyes, sort of, only they're pigments. And those have never been tested for anything, but many of them are in classes of chemicals that we know will cause cancer if they're ever tested. But they're labeled non-toxic, because in the United States, a chemical for which there is no data can be labeled non-toxic by default. The manufacturer can say, oh, you can't prove it's toxic. And somehow we have never turned that around and said to the manufacturer, no, no, you have to prove that it's safe. Well, the European Union took a look at what we're doing over here. I just got back, strangely enough, being in a college that has a Dutch affiliation. I got back from Amsterdam a while back after teaching a week there. And all of the European countries have figured out there's something very wrong with what we're doing over here. And they set up something called REACH. It's the Registration, Evaluation, Authorization of Chemicals. And they actually are demanding that industry actually test the chemicals. Our people are not doing it, but they are demanding. In fact, they have identified 30,000 chemicals that are manufactured in over 1,000 tons per year that are in commerce, on which there is no data at all. And they're finally saying, hey, enough. And so they're giving various schedules between 2012 and 2018 for people to actually test these chemicals and find out what they do. My guess is that we're still not going to do it. We're still going to try to tough it through and say, who can't tell us what to do? It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And every other country understands that. we still don't. In the 1930s, 1940s, we were the most advanced country in terms of safety and chemicals. We were the first people to set standards for worker exposure to chemicals, airborne chemicals. Then in 1971, spastic. 1971, OSHA formed, and they set a bunch of these permissible exposure limits based on the standards we'd developed, and we started to enforce them. Have we learned anything, you think, maybe about toxicity since 1971? Yeah. Has OSHA been able to update their standards since 1971? Nah. Because every time they do, industry takes them to court and gets it rolled back. Out of 400 some PELs, they have updated 16. And now there are 640 some new standards that have been developed for which OSHA has no standards to protect you in the workplace at all. Europe looks at this and says, what are you doing? And I have to agree with them. I just have to agree with them. So we're going to be taking our orders fairly soon, I think, from the UN and from the EU, because if we want to continue to sell products, we have to include the European Union market, which is 450 million consumers. Now they're talking. Now our industry has got their attention. That's something. So if we want to keep selling, we're going to have to look at their standards. When you go home, look at your computer. Just look at it. Take a few minutes. Look at the plastic that's around the monitor, around the tower. Unless you're one of these so modern people, it's all in one now. I don't understand you at all. But if you look at all the plastic bits, know that there's two things in there, two types of chemicals. There are the brominated fire retardants, and there are the phthalate plasticizers. And they don't stay in the plastic. They come out into your house, and they get in your dust. You already know this if you think about your new car. Oh, new car, you get in it and sit down, the soft plush seats and the nice shiny dashboard and what am I smelling? New car smell. The smell of conspicuous consumption. Oh, we love that. That's phthalate plasticizers. Many of those are banned in Europe already. 6 of them are banned here now. That shows you how bad they are, because we don't ban things till stuff starts falling off us. But we still got other phthalates, same class, coming out. Brominated fire retardants, polybrominated biphenyl ethers, if you've had any chemistry. Okay? Most of them banned in Europe. Still in your computer. Coming out. Probably cause cancer, reproductive damage, developmental delays, all kinds of things. And then think about the guts of that computer. If you've been unfortunate, as I have, to have it ripped open a bunch of times by some guru to try to get you back up and running, you know there's all those little soldered dinkies and all this mysterious looking little lines and stuff. That contains lead, cadmium, chromium, and mercury. Look at that. European community computers don't have that. Your computer is illegal to sell there. And the same company that makes your computer makes one without all that stuff to sell over there. What are we doing? What are we doing? Aren't we supposed to be leading? Why have we turned over the environmental and the safety rules and the purpose of our economy to the lowest common denominator. I don't understand it. And it's up to you people. I'm an old broad, man, I'm done. You know, I'm 4 years older than dirt. But you guys are young. This is your world I'm talking about. It doesn't have to be like this. Because I can remember the 40s. Oh, I really can. And we were ahead. And we were proud. And look at what we've done. We've just let it slide. And all we think about is money. There's only 2 steps to progress in the United States. Invent something, find a market for it. Isn't there something missing in between, like testing to find out if it's going to freaking kill us? That's what's missing. We only do quality testing. Will it meet the customer's needs? Will they be happy with it? We don't look at the long term. We don't look at whether or not it can cause cancer, birth defects, autism. We don't know anything about that. That's why it's real sad that there are people who are all concerned about the mercury in the vaccinations. There's hundreds of other possibilities for what's causing that, most of which we haven't even looked at. And I'll tell you something that I know from studying toxicology for many, many years. When you hear hoofbeats, don't think zebra. Think something common. Try to figure out what's really happening. And when you're looking for something that's causing a huge uptick in a disease, you want to look for something that's in millions of tons a year that's coming into the economy, that's widely dispersed, that's everywhere. I'm just going to offer one possibility, and I don't even know if that's it, but I'm just going to tell you about one possibility. It's a group of solvents called the glycol ethers. And I bring it up because I know everyone in this room is exposed to them. Everyone. None of you have missed it. Probably not even today. Why? Because they're in everything. Fantastic, 409, Windex, Simple Green, almost all the ordinary cleaners, fast cleaners. They're in latex paints, water-based latex paints. These mix with water, so they're in all those nice, supposedly safe, water-based products. They came into existence just about the time we started to see the uptick in autism. And they were everywhere. As soon as we switched from the solvent-based ones, which obviously we know causes neurological problems, bad idea there too. But these, you are exposed to in many ways. First of all, they will go through your skin. Right through your skin, like your skin wasn't there. So if you touch them, you've got them. If you put on rubber gloves, they will go through the rubber gloves and into your skin and not change the look of the rubber gloves. You have to wear special gloves in order to protect yourself. Nobody does that. Playtex living gloves happen to be rubber. And housewives and pregnant women all over the country are using ordinary gloves. You can also inhale it. And so these are out there in vast amounts, in everything. Has anybody looked to see if maybe there's a relationship? No. No. But this is only one. I could go into other, just as good possibilities of things that are used in large amounts that I know you're exposed to and that I know you're carrying in your bodies. The Centers for Disease Control is now monitoring people for 212 different chemicals. PCBs, dioxins, phthalates, brominated chemicals, the lot. These are the ones they know cause cancer and other types of disease. Every single person on the planet, not just you, everyone is carrying these. No one is born anywhere on the face of the earth that is not already carrying some of these chemicals. And if you're born on a South Sea island, you carry even more because you eat a lot of fish, and many of these are fat-soluble toxins. If you're the Inuit up in Canada, you are just full of them because you eat marine mammals. Well, think about that. If nobody is unexposed, how do we find out what these chemicals do to us? You see, the only way to test whether something is toxic is to find a population that's exposed and compare it with a population that is unexposed, and there is no more unexposed population. So industry is home free. They will never be blamed because it will be impossible to blame them. There is no population left. So we have to do animal tests. Better than nothing. Now, I'm a vegetarian. I do not believe in killing anything that you don't have to kill. I wear these stupid plastic shoes, and I don't wear leather. I really do it up. But if you don't do animal testing, you got nothing. You have no information because you can't find the answer in a petri dish. I would love it if you could. If you could, I'd be the first one up on the barricades. Absolutely. But if you want to know what happens when you put something in a complex thing like a lung, you got to put it in a lung. If you want to know what happens as it goes through a digestive tract with all the different enzymes and heat and movement and cellular activity, you got to put it in a digestive tract. You got no choice. There's no petri dish or test tube that's going to do that. I wish there was. I really wish there was. So we need to do this testing. We need to try to figure out as best we can from the limited data, and then we need to do something else that Europe is talking about, and it's called the precautionary principle. And it will turn our economy on its head, because what it says is, if you don't know whether something is toxic or not, don't assume it's safe. You have to treat it as if it were toxic unless you know otherwise. And that's what is happening over there. That's what is coming here. It is marching. And sooner or later, we need to catch up with it. And we need to get on board. And we need to make sure that industry starts doing what they need to do to protect us, because right now they're not. Right now they're not. Any questions so far before we get depressed about other subjects? Look at that, all afraid to ask me anything. Okay, yes?
Can you talk about your definition of non-toxic and natural?
Okay, that's a really good point. See, I knew I brought him along for some reason. Yeah. Non-toxic is written on so many labels. In fact, what does it say on here? Read that whole line. Nice and loud.
Conforms to ASTM D4236, non-toxic, USA.
Okay. It says conforms to ASTM D4236, non-toxic. ASTM D4236 is a subcommittee of the American Society of Testing and Materials. I sit on that committee. I'm one of the fools who had that put into law. It is illegal to sell any art material in the United States that does not reference that standard. We did it because back in 1988, the only definition of non-toxic allowed very toxic materials, even for children. And here's how that happened. The definition for non-toxic under the Federal Hazardous Substances Act at that time was this. It was the LD50 and LC50 animal tests. These are tests by skin contact, eye contact, inhalation, and ingestion. If we take the ingestion test as an example, they take 10 or more rats, they feed them a single dose at 5 grams per kilogram of body weight, and they wait 2 weeks. Now they come back and they look on their rats. If half or more are dead, they have to call it toxic. But if less than half are dead, it is now non-toxic. So the difference between toxic and non-toxic is one rat that's probably getting cardiac massage, CPR, and prayer. But the real problem is not the few things that fall on that borderline, it's the whole test. How long did the test take? 2 weeks. Is cancer going to happen in 2 weeks? No, not a chance. How many doses did they get? 1. Do you know that it's impossible to have a sensitivity or an allergic reaction with a single dose? Your body has to get familiar with it and learn how to make antibodies to it, and then start making so many antibodies that the antibodies are the problem. So we won't know if any of these things cause allergies. What happens if the stuff we're testing causes birth defects? In 2 weeks, what are we going to know? Nothing. Under these tests, powdered asbestos gets a perfect score. Doesn't harm any animals by any of the routes of entry in 2 weeks. And that was the law that was protecting us. And so we realized this couldn't be, because there, for instance, was a Milton Bradley product for children called Fibro Clay. It was a powdered mixture that you would add water to and make it into paper mache. It contained over 50% chrysotile asbestos powder. It had the AP seal. Have you ever seen that? In fact, this one doesn't have it, but there's an AP seal, approved product for children, non-toxic. CP seal. Anyway, same organization, still doing that crappy labeling. So we realized we had to do something about that. So we took those kinds of products all over the United States. We did teach-ins, and we finally got legislators to listen. We got laws passed in 7 states because the federal government wouldn't listen to us. And by that time, with 7 different laws to meet, the manufacturers wanted a federal law because they were tired of trying to meet 7 different states, and we were getting more and more states all the time. So they changed the law, and they required this standard to be put into law. Now, let me just tell you about that standard. It says a toxicologist, oh, doesn't that sound cool? A toxicologist should look at the list of ingredients as provided by the manufacturer and determine what the labeling should be. And then if the manufacturer uses the labeling he recommends, he certifies it as meeting this standard, and it gets this conformance statement. Well, we really didn't think that through. We were very young. And we didn't think about who pays the toxicologist for certifying the product. Who would that be? Guess. No, the manufacturers. Do we see a problem there? Absolutely. And the manufacturers all wanted the non-toxic label because the schools, in their ignorance, wanted that non-toxic label, not realizing it was meaningless. So these toxicologists twisted that law 6 ways to Sunday so that they could continue to give non-toxic labels to all kinds of products. For a while, they were selling lead glazes, not only as non-toxic, but lead-free, when they actually contained lead on the basis of a phony acid test. There were 2 trials for brain-damaged kids, brain-damaged in utero by their mothers who trusted that label and used those glazes while they were pregnant. And I did expert witness opposite the toxicologist who put that seal on those products. And we got big settlements for those kids. So they stopped using it for glazes, but they're still using that test for paints. And if I told you all the other things they're doing, you just wouldn't believe. You'd say, oh my God, how can they do that? Because money is talking. You always have to follow the money. Always. Every time you look at a site on the internet, find out who put it up, who pays for it, how do they make their money, what keeps them going. Always. You can never let that go, because sooner or later, it's the thing that calls the shots. So when I set up my little nonprofit, we figured, first of all, we're serving artists, we're probably serving the poor. So one of the things we don't do is ask for donations or solicit money. So we help for nothing. We're like nuts. It's when I come and do a lecture or when I do a walkthrough or I plan a building that we get a fee that supports our nonprofit status. And we get no money, we take nothing from anyone who could care about our opinions. No manufacturers, nothing. You need to know that, and those are the only types of organizations you should trust. And then still, think it through yourself. Don't even believe what I'm saying. Go check out what I'm saying. Find out. Because you really have to have that kind of canniness in this world. The world of advertising is scary. I'll tell you the best place to really see them lie. Late night television. Oh, selling the air purifiers and the vacuum cleaners. Wow. All these things that are going to clean up your air. Most of them make it. Does anyone own an ionic breeze? Anyone ever had one? If you do, they owe you money. They lost a big lawsuit. And they have to provide for you a catalytic converter to go in front of your ionic breeze to convert the ozone, the highly toxic ozone it creates and puts in your air, back into oxygen. Why would you buy? So no negative ion generators, no ozone generators. No, they just keep up. They come up like weeds and keep right on selling it. Why do they sell ozone? What does ozone smell like? Does anyone know? Why do they keep getting away with putting ozone in your air? One of the most toxic gases known. What does it smell like?
Nothing.
Well, it sort of smells like nothing, but something a little extra. When does Mother Nature make ozone?
It rains.
Hmm?
When it rains.
Not when it rains, when it lightnings. Ozone is created anytime electricity goes through air. Okay? And that's what a negative ion generator does. There's a charge going there. And that's why it produces ozone. But Mother Nature makes a bunch of lightning, and then the storm is over, and we come out and say, ah, that's ozone. Thanks for Mother Nature. And we associate it with healthy, safe air, and it isn't. It's the one time Mother Nature's given you a pretty good shot. But we now think, oh boy, that's good stuff. So if they've got an air purifier that smells like after a storm, hey, we'll buy it, we'll put in the ozone, we'll snort it. And then you see these people selling, filters for things, vacuum cleaners. What's the most important thing a vacuum cleaner should do? Pick up the really nasty fine dust in your house, right? Do they tell you what's coming out the back end? Are they giving you any data about how much dust it actually collects of the fine particles? No. No. The real bad one is the guy who collects marbles. Have you seen him collecting marbles on the floor? With a vacuum cleaner that never loses power. Oh, it never loses power. Think of that. Oh, How does he do that? It doesn't freaking have a filter. It does it on centrifugal force. Well, that'll get your marbles, but it's not going to get the fine dust in your house. That's going right out the other end. So think. Always think. What are they not saying? What are they not telling you? And believe no one. Always use your own head, because they are out there taking your money, ripping you off, and giving you bupkis. And although I know how dangerous a lot of the chemical products there is a secret that can keep you safe. And that secret is that no one was ever harmed by a chemical to which they were not exposed. So you need to think about what kind of gloves to wear, what kind of ventilation you want. This is the one school where if you do painting, you are going to work without getting a big snoot full of turpentine, which you shouldn't work with anyway. And it's going to get a safer solvent, and it's going to be taken away from you. This is the one school where you've got a chance to practice some art and do some things without getting a heavy-duty exposure. I can tell you, and if you have been looking around at colleges before you came here, you have probably seen some real hellholes out there. You can find your way to the painting department with your nose. Don't tell me it's over this way. How safe is that? All of the solvents are neurotoxins, and you're young people. Some of you actually may get pregnant one day. You do not want to be snorting solvents. Got to be thinking. So this is a great school to be at. I really, I have to agree. There's probably about 5 schools now I've seen with good ventilation, and this is one of them. This is one of them. You're very lucky here. So keep thinking. Be very, very careful what you believe, and always document things. All those things that they make us do in college, like writing papers, providing references, all that dull, boring stuff, all of that is part of something. You don't have to remember those papers. You don't have to remember that thesis. You don't have to remember any of that. What you need to remember is how you prove the stuff, how you research, how you get that data, when you believe it and when you don't, how you check it out, who you ask. That's what it's all about. And if I could give you one other piece of advice, oh boy, I would tell you to get some hard science background. When I went to school 100 years ago, you couldn't get a degree in anything without a year of chemistry, a year of math, and a year of physics. Do I remember all the physics? No, but you know what? I have a sense of how the world works. I know that there's a formula that expresses the friction between my foot and this floor. Do I remember all my chemistry? No, but I remember enough to be an expert in this field. And if I can get this back on. And I know that, for instance, if somebody asks me a question like, if I have only so much water and a dirty jar, will I clean it quicker if I pour the whole mess in there and shake it around and dump it out, or if I pour small amounts and do it many times? Do you know? There's a differential equation that will answer that. So that's the thought process. You begin to understand there is a structure to math and to chemistry and physics. And once you get that feeling and understand that basis, all of a sudden the world starts making sense. And you lift up the hood of your car and it isn't as big a mystery. And you turn on the light switch and it isn't that big a mystery because you know volts and amps and ohms and all that. And you understand in series and parallel. And suddenly the world just kind of gets better. All of that stuff is important. You don't have to remember all the details, But the feeling and knowing when something sounds right because it's beginning to fit all of those patterns. That's what you need to know. Right now we've got too many people out there who are just being patsies. And when it comes to your products and the stuff you take and the stuff, boy, you gotta look at the data. If there's no data, don't take it. And don't go to the health food store. Dangerous place. You don't want your advice coming from somebody with pimples in the health food store. You really do not. That is not your expert. Trust me. None of those products have to have any testing at all. As soon as they say supplement or natural on them, it's over. Well, I've got a secret for you. Mother Nature doesn't love you. When you look at the billions of plants all around the earth, billions and billions of different species and types, only a handful can we cultivate and eat without croaking. Those plants are all out for themselves. Each one is making their own insecticides. In fact, some of them make their own herbicides to keep the other plants away from them. They make their medicines, their food. They're busy, they're little chemical factories, and they are not considering you in the process. They're considering themselves and their long evolutionary history. And it's just lucky we have found a number of things that we actually can eat. But to go there and say, well, it's natural, so it must be good, I'll scarf that down. Oh, please. And without studies, you don't know. There was a really good example back a while ago of what I'm talking about. And it had to do with something called hormone replacement. And hormone replacement was when you got old like me and you would take something that would tell your body, no, you're still a kid. And if you did that and you took these hormones, you could really testify. You would have said, I look better, I feel better, I got a libido, I am just in better shape than I've ever been. I feel wonderful. So you can't rely on personal testimony. You do not care what anyone says about it. No personal testimony. Forget it. You only want numbers. And the first studies that showed they were safe were small. 100 people here, 100 people there. That's not good. But people were so anxious to do this because people were so happy with it that out it went. FDA approved. And you started having people taking this hormone replacement and everybody was just smiling and trucking and keeping on going. Then finally, they studied 16,000 people. 8,000 on placebo and 8,000 taking the replacement hormones. And then they stopped the study early because it was so clear that the strokes and the clots and the heart attacks and the cancer were there. So this became something you do. Now they're talking about it again. What did the people immediately do? They went to phyto hormones. Natural plant hormones. Whee! Now we're home free. Mother Nature. We'll extract from soy and all this stuff. It isn't where the hormone comes from, it's what it does to you that makes the problem. It does not matter whether the chemical is made by God or by Goodyear. It just doesn't matter. What matters is what it does to you. These are going to be the same as these. So you don't listen to personal testimony. You look for studies. You don't jump on any bandwagon on anything new. You wait till those tires got worn down the track a ways before you jump on anything. Take your time. Think about things. You want to see the numbers. If there's no studies, don't take them. And just because you feel good, that isn't the answer. If only feeling good was the answer, heroin would be our thing. Whoa, you want to feel good? Hey, there's a way to do it. So we really need to be canny and realize what kind of world we're in. So where are we going to graduate, and what are we going to do? How many people want to actually go out and teach? Anyone crazy enough to do that? Oh, my dears, my deepest sympathies. You are in such trouble. How many want to be professionals in theater? Anyone want to be that? Okay, get in a union. Because you have no clout alone. If you're working all alone, they don't have to do anything to you, to please you. They don't have to take care of you. They don't have to anything. How many people know what workers' compensation is? So if I get hurt on the job, I get workers' compensation, right? Hopefully. Maybe not. Here's what happened when we got workers' comp. We lost the right to sue. That was the trade-off. Your employer can deliberately put you in harm's way, can injure you for life, and you will get workers' comp. In New York, up until a few years ago, that was $400 a week compensation for full disability. They've since raised it to $600. In New York, we can't even meet our rent on workers' compensation. And all that happens to the employer is his rates may go up a tad. He has no incentive whatever to take care of you. No incentive whatever. I just read a lawsuit that a worker lost in Louisiana. He was on a construction job, and the boss ordered him to violate the OSHA regulations by climbing up the outside of the scaffold. You know, they're supposed to go up the ladders in between and all that, set those up. And so he was doing it. They call it free climbing. And he fell 20 feet, smashed his ankles, internal injuries, really seriously hurt. Before the ambulance came, the employer ordered 2 of his men to drag him over to a ladder so that the EMS would report that he had fallen off the ladder. So the worker tried to sue, and he lost the suit. The judge says, well, you can't prove that dragging you over there made your injury worse. They don't care. I am telling you, they don't. I've dealt with the employers in film, TV, and theater now for many, many years. In fact, even more years than you would think, because my parents booked out of Chicago. I had a union card at age 3 as a traveling performer. So I've had 71 years of theater experience. So I have seen employers over a long time. So if I sound jaded, maybe you should listen to me. Because I have seen them all, and I know they care about themselves. They talk a good game. Oh, listen to the people at Spider-Man talk about how they put safety first as they splat one person after another off the things and into the pit. I'm telling you, they don't care. They don't have to care. There is nothing in our law that makes them care. You cannot sue your employer. Unless he goes out and deliberately gets a gun and comes and blows a hole in you, you have nothing. If he knowingly puts you in harm's way, all you get is workers' comp. And if he kills you, the death benefit in most states is around $20,000. Is somebody going to put your kids through school for $20,000 if you've got a family? Is that all you're worth? No, you need to think You need to organize, you need to work with each other, you need to make sure somebody is looking out for you. And it's the same in many colleges and many schools. I have seen people really seriously harmed in schools as well. There's no job where you can say, oh yeah, they really care. No, they don't. It's money. You're a commodity. So you better think of yourself in a way that you can protect yourself. So you can probably tell that I'm very pro-union. And I know that's a very shaky position today. People say, well, the union, they make you give them benefits and stuff. Yeah, hey, organize and you too. The real problem is not why are the union people having benefits, but why are you not? That's the real question. And right now they're turning the people with benefits, you know, again, the people with no benefits are turning against the people with benefits, and they want to bring them down to their level, when instead what we should be doing is bringing everybody up to where we're taken care of. And we can live a normal life, and we don't have to be afraid, and we have health care. And if you think we can't do that, because after all, there's no money left in the budget, so therefore we have to take one for the team and give up our benefits down here at the bottom, while the people at the top are getting million and billion-dollar bonuses, and the banks are not sending the money back for us to use, then I think you need math. Because you're not looking at the numbers. Why should we take a hit at the bottom when we see what's happening at the top? Do you know the corporations have made more money this year than in a long time? Have you read that? Do you know? Okay, we'll give up our bennies and we'll look at and we'll calculate the amount of our income that we are giving up, and we will ask the rich to do the same in the same proportion. Now you're talking. If we take a hit for the team, they can take a hit for the team. If this is one country, all of the giving cannot be down here. It's got to be up there. Well, you see, I belong in Wisconsin, back now in my hometown, walking in the streets. Because I was one of those 60s activists back then. That's where I went to school. That's where I was born. So you can't take that out of, you know, I mean, after all, it's like a disease. You get born in Madison, you're always on a soapbox. At least one foot is up on a soapbox at all times. But I worry about you, because I see you coming into the workforce. And I know that when we get a new worker in my union who has just graduated from a college, even a big one, and they're coming in, they got their first big job, and they're coming into the union, the first thing I have to do is train them. Why is that? Why wasn't that happening in their school? Why didn't they know any of the basic safety, the OSHA regulations? Why wasn't that part of their training? It should have been. Why did they go to a school, not here, but to other schools where I see them learn to break the law? They learn to use chemicals without the proper eye wash station, without the proper safety equipment, without the proper training, no ventilation. I see them learn how to break the law. So it's scary. How do they get out of school? Not knowing. How can we give somebody a degree in art or in theater where we say you are now ready for a professional job, and they don't know a single law or regulation that applies to their work? What is that? And yet that's the norm. That's the norm. The whole thing has to be taught. Can't go out there naked without this understanding how to protect yourself. and what those laws are, because those are pretty good laws if somebody would just follow them. I know one of the problems that they keep bringing up is that it costs too much to enforce the laws. And that's been the way the laws have been slipped like this, is there are some really good laws on the books, but the agencies' budgets have been cut to the point that they have no money to enforce them, so they just kind of sit there. And then what happens is usually there's a big accident, and then OSHA or EPA or somebody comes in who has the authority for that particular type of accident, and all of a sudden they hold the school or the business or whatever to all these rules, and then it just is a big mess, and they fine them millions of dollars and all the rest. That's sad. But that's the way it's been operating, instead of keeping up and trying to do it right. But what we should be doing is teaching everybody what these laws and these regulations are, and finding a way to enforce them. And there is one way I have found where we could enforce the laws with almost no government. Ooh, boy, that sounds so Republican. It makes me nervous. How could we do that? Well, it's based on a rule, a law that is really good. It's called Proposition 65, and it's in California. You may have seen on occasion a product where on the back of it it'll say, known to the state of California to contain some horrendous thing. This is a really interesting law. Really interesting law. And it has the effect of a federal law. Because unless the manufacturer says, well, people from California cannot buy this product, if people in California can buy it, they come under this law. So let me show you how this law works, because it's quite interesting. Let's see, you and I, we own a small nonprofit organization, and we got money problems, okay? You know, like all nonprofits, we do good work, but we don't get much money for it, and so we're kind of like hurting a little bit. So we ask our lawyer over here, would you mind taking a couple of Proposition 65 cases for us if we got the data? She says, sure, I know how to do that. Good. So we go over here to a rental company and we rent an RXF analyzer. They're really interesting machines. You can shoot them at things, and you can set them for lead, you can set them for cadmium, you can set them for phthalates, you can set them for all kinds of regulated stuff. And they will aim at it, and you hit the button, and it will tell you what percentage of those chemicals are in that product. Ooh, interesting. So now we go over here to a store, and we buy a bunch of products. And we start shooting them. And we find 5 or 6 that fail. Really fail, because there's a big list of chemicals there that if they contain them and they don't have a warning, whoo, they're in violation of that law. So we get the manufacturers. Let's see, these are the 3 manufacturers of the products that we found that failed. Okay? Now, we then take these products that we bought to the laboratory. And the laboratory, we say we want a really good analysis, certified analysis of these, exactly how much lead or whatever we're looking for is in them. The laboratory gives us our analysis. Boy, there we go. Now we got our data. Okay, lawyer, get ready if we need you. Now we go to the Attorney General's office, and we hand it to the Attorney General's office, and we say, look at the data we got here. She says, great. We're going to sue those 3 manufacturers over there. And they get really big money because the fines are in the range of $2,500 per offense per day. That could amount to real money. And if she wins the case, we get part of the settlement. Now suppose I took the data over to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General says, I'm too busy. I absolutely don't have time to do this. So we come back and we say, okay, lawyer, here's all of the data. You have to sit on it now 60 days. If in 60 days the Attorney General's office still doesn't file, we file. Cool. Because now we get all the money. And it's big. So there are roving bands of lawyers who go around working with nonprofits and others, enforcing this law. It enforces itself. And California doesn't need a whole bunch of inspectors because everybody else is doing it. What we call this is power to the people. It's called a Citizens Enforcement Clause. So if you really want to enforce a law, if you put a Citizens Enforcement Clause in it, it will enforce itself. And it will not take a government agency to do it. It will not take any money. And many people will make money, and the only money will be coming from the manufacturers who put the toxic substance in the product without the label. Who better? Who better? So the next time they say, well, we can't have laws like that because we couldn't afford to enforce them, you say, there is a way. We can set up a penalty schedule, put in a Citizens Enforcement Clause, and the law will enforce itself. Just think about it. That's the way we have to start thinking. If we really want to cut government, without cutting services, without cutting fairness, without cutting enforcement of good laws, maybe we need to come up with something like this. I think we really, really need to consider it. Because whatever we're doing now, it's not working. When you guys get out and look for jobs, you'll find it's not working. Trust me. Any questions before I probably find another thing to get all bent out of shape about? You're just going to watch me fail here, aren't you? Anybody doing anything unusual? Have any unusual plans for your life? Just going to do the regular?
What's the regular?
You what?
What's the regular?
Well, I mean, when I ask if you're going to be a teacher, well, sometimes somebody wants to teach something really different or do something really different with teaching. Sometimes when I talk about theater, somebody has an entirely different idea of what they want to do in theater, what kind of group they want to set up, what they're aiming for. And so I just thought maybe someone had some idea like that. One of the things, this outline that you have here also, you have access to me. You know where I live. Okay? So you can never again say, well, I couldn't find out about that chemical. Or I couldn't get an answer to that question because I answer 35 inquiries now a day anyway. A couple more from you guys is not going to wreck me. So you now have another resource. If somebody wants to write a paper, I can't tell you how many people I advise on papers and things like that. If you've got some interesting little twist on some of this or some idea, you can tell this is not just a job with me. I should have retired and crawled into a hole long ago. But I'm going to work till I'm dead, and then I'm coming in half days. And it's because I love it. So, you won't be bothering me by getting in touch with me, finding out about stuff, because I really, really want to see you people succeed. And the only way you can succeed is to make this whole world work, and it's not working right now. I'm sorry, it's just not working. And you just have to be fooling yourself if you think it is. So many things need to be just ripped up and redone from the bottom up. Yes?
Just a question to maybe direct
Sure.
the conversation a little bit. I think something that would be valuable for me to hear, as well as maybe
Nice and loud.
valuable for me to hear, as well as perhaps some students are. You've seen our building. You've
Yes.
kind of gotten at least a general idea of the types of things that we use, and that these students are likely to use on an everyday basis. would you mind talking a little bit about just some of your essential, practical, some of the important day-to-day types of awareness that students should
Okay,
when it comes
very
to
good.
using their
Because, for instance, we went through in the session this morning on how to evaluate the different solvents. And we showed exactly why you want to use Gamsol, which has a 300 part per million TLV. In other words, quite a bit is allowed in the air for healthy adult workers. Whereas you don't want to use mineral spirits or terpenoid, which is 100 and much lower, or turpentine, which is 20, way down here. So you can literally look at those numbers and say, let's use that one. So you want to use the safest solvent, and the safest solvent of all is no solvent at all. Seriously consider it, because there are now water washable oils. Every single paint manufacturer makes them. And I know some of the purists don't like them, but I saw an evaluation by someone who worked for the Library of Congress in their conservation department, and he said they are going to be just fine, thank you very much. And here there's no solvents, and you wash up with water, and you can even do a wash using water with oil paints. Okay, so that's something to think about. Or acrylics, which don't take solvents. Because solvents you can't avoid completely because they're evaporating into your bloody face. So if you can get rid of the solvents, or reduce the solvents, or get a safer solvent, all of those are good moves. You can't really avoid the pigments because some of those are going to be nasty, but you got to just know those are nasty. And if they go from the tube to the palette, to the brush, to the canvas, you didn't have an exposure. But if you get some on the floor and you walk around, now you're tracking it all over. And we're talking milligrams. You can't even see a milligram that gets tracked around. You don't want that. And you don't want to do that at home because where are you washing your brushes? Either the kitchen or the bathroom sink. Neither one's a good choice. You want to work in school. You want to work in a studio when you have enough money. You don't want to be working at home. And if you got kids, you absolutely don't want to work at home because it doesn't take much of these things. So you have to know what you're dealing with and find ways to use it so that it's not getting airborne. So you don't want to sand your canvas. It's going everywhere then, not unless you can do it in a spray booth like you have in the painting department. Your printmaking person has already switched from all of those rotten acids to ferric chloride for etching. Mazel tov on him. This is wonderful. Because this is much safer. I mean, the worst you can do is if you get it splashed in your eyes, you're going to have bright yellow eyes for about a month. Look like hell. But, you know, that's it. So you've already got a faculty here who gets this. But anytime something makes a dust, evaporates into the air, you want to look at that process. You don't want that. You want to find a way around it. If you're going to do pastels, I know it's nice and please, you're going to be snorting pigments. If you use oil pastels, mazel tov, no problem. So if the stuff goes where you want it to go and stays there, you don't care that it's toxic. But when it gets other places where you don't want, when you're foolish enough to bring your lunch in the room, or have a bottle of water all the time next to you like you're going to dry up and blow away without it. You know, geez. I don't know what, you know, I remember, you know, we used to have intervals between drinking. Not today, man. You know, some schools I cannot get more than 3 feet away from water anywhere in the building. It's not necessary. I mean, it's nice to stay hydrated, keep your little cheeks up and all that, but you don't need to have it every minute in class. You're supposed to, under the OSHA regulations, go to a place that is safe and sanitary to eat and to recreate and have some water or do whatever you're going to do. So find a nice, safe and sanitary place and sit down and eat like a normal. Okay? Is that what you're looking for? Yeah. Any other products you want me to bitch about? Wood. Well, Here again, wood is really interesting. We've got handouts on wood for them too, don't we? Yeah, they can come up and get a handout. Because you see, wood is one of the few proven human carcinogens, no animal data, all people data. Something like 80% of all adenocarcinoma of the nasal sinus cavity is among woodworkers. It's real known, and they also have high rates of throat and larynx cancers. And that figures, again, because of what trees are. So we know that they can cause dermatitis and allergies, cancer, asthma, lots of stuff. So the important thing is to keep that dust down. Now, your shop has some pretty good ventilation systems, and we talked about ways to make some of them even better. But one of the things you don't want to do is sit there at home and fan something. Really not smart. You want to make sure that that dust is not going everywhere, because it's a sensitizer and it's dangerous. Now, does every single woodworker come down with cancer? No. No. And it means if you're going to go into woodwork, you want to know that that's one of your risks, because it's one of those cancers you can also fix. If you notice nosebleeds or other kinds of problems, you get it fixed right away, you got a good shot. But that's what I'm saying. Know what you're working with. And don't kid yourself. And there's nothing that's all good and all bad. Just figure it out. Yeah. That was a good question. I like that. You can come on my next lecture, too. Any other ideas anyone has? Because you do better at asking questions than I do, because I'll just get political again. You don't want to hear that. No other? Yes?
I was just wondering about the book you said that was coming out this week. Is it more of like a practical?
Well, no. If you want practical books, there's one called The Artist's Complete Health and Safety Guide, but I actually would prefer you wait a year, because I have to write another edition. If you get an old edition, get it cheap, because some of that's going to change, so some new standards. But it really goes over everything, and there's lists in there of all the pigments and all the stuff. It's just really a pretty good book. It actually got a rave review from the American Industrial Hygiene Association, which is, a pretty good idea, and it won a prize, the College and Research Libraries Institute Prize as the best book one year. So it's a good book. If you're into theater, there's one called Health and Safety Guide for Film, TV, and Theater. And that one, again, wait this year. It's coming out this year. I don't know just which month, but keep an eye out for that, because it'll be in second edition. The one you're waiting for is the fourth edition. And so those are good general texts, and they're used in many, many schools and colleges all over. So those are pretty good texts, and they cover just about everything that you would need. But the one that's coming out next week, I was talking on the radio, shooting my mouth off as I usually do. I'm a regular on WNYC, and an editor from Wiley & Sons heard me talking, and he says, "We want a book like that." And I says, "No, you don't." And so we fought for a while, and then they sent me an advance that took my breath away. So money does talk.
You talk a whole bunch about safety processes in art. Could you talk a little bit about theater, like stage safety and cosmetics and?
Yes. Yeah, I just want to write down the title of the new book, though. Pick your poison. How our mad dash to chemical utopia has made lab rats of us all. So that's what they wanted. That's what I gave them. But as for theater, yeah, that's everything is changing in theater. How many people in high school, there was a stage, and there was a lip at the front of the stage that if you fell off, you were probably going to get hurt? How many people had like that? And nobody ever said anything about it. They said, don't fall off of that. That was the extent of their safety program. Well, you can't do that anymore. You have to have a written program, and you have to address that hazard. All of the new theaters we're building have a drop-in rail. And if you have, if you have a a pit elevator, you have to have a rail here and a rail on the stage proper. Because why? You don't know who's walking on that stage when you're not around. You don't know what's happening there. Somebody's taking some blue-haired old ladies like me around looking at the theater and walking them right past this lip of the stage. You can't have a fall hazard. OSHA says you can't have a fall hazard without addressing it. So if you are a big, husky construction worker, trained and experienced, OSHA does not allow you to stand in front of a 6-foot fall unless there is a rail there or you are in harness and lanyard. But I can take a child and put them on the edge of this stage, hit them with bright lights, blow smoke in their face, go to black and tell them to exit. That makes absolutely no sense. It's insane. So finally, it came to lawsuits and cases. And I was hired by the Department of Labor to defend OSHA in a contested citation. In Atlanta, they were doing a production of The Nutcracker, and the high school student volunteer, you know, they always get kids in those poor things, fell 12 feet, serious accident, you know, spinal surgery, the works. I mean, she really got smashed up. And of course, OSHA couldn't do anything because that's a student. That's not a worker. They can only look at the employer and the employee. So what OSHA did is bought a ticket. The inspector bought a ticket, sat in the show, the next show, and every time a dancer came closer than 6 feet to the edge of the stage, they marked it as a violation of the fall hazard. Okay? And they wanted me to help them make that stick, and we did. They have to have a program. Their program we accepted because they were a traveling company. We couldn't have them. They can't go around telling every theater that if they get booked into, you got to put up a temporary rail. So what we did is we said you have to have your rehearsal hall marked off to the exact size of the stage that you will be working in and rehearse at least 2 weeks there. And so that everyone is blocked. You have to put LED lights along the fall hazard. Maybe a spotter light in the wings and so on, so that everybody is always aware of where they are on that stage, and so that can't happen. And they have to, if they're going to have any kind of costumes that impede vision, they have to rehearse that 2 weeks in those costumes. Okay? Big change. Big change. You can't just have that fall hazard and treat it like it's nothing. It is something. So theater's changing. And it used to be you go into theaters and you keep seeing these catwalk light rails that are 55 inches above the stage. I don't know how many theaters you've been in, but I've been in thousands. And that's where they were. Well, that's because in my day, theater lights were this big. And we needed them up at 55 inches. Well, you see the nice little ones you got now. We don't need that. So now we can put that at the 42 inches that OSHA requires, put in a mid-rail and that toe board like you have up above here, and you're compliant. Because if your rail is at 55 with nothing under, you got to be in harness and lanyard when you walk on the catwalk. Well, what a pain in the tush that is. So we are redesigning theaters so that they meet the OSHA regulations, and so that we don't have to have all of these weird kinds of extra protections. Now, sometimes the architects don't get it, I got to tell you. I have seen some really bad theaters in the last few years. And I understand why they're confused, because they sometimes don't, well, they almost never know the OSHA regulations. What they know are the various building codes. And those building codes are not written for workers, they are written for the general public. For example, if you go up to a balcony and you sit down and there's a rail The codes, depending on what state you're in, usually tell you that can be 26, 27 inches. Well, OSHA says 42. So it's okay to set somebody carefully down on those chairs in the general public and then usher them out again. But it is not okay to send a worker up there to clean those seats. That's a violation of the OSHA regulations. Because he has to have, or she has to have, a 42-inch rail with a mid-rail and a toe board, or you got to put her in harness. It's law. So now we design rails that have a pull-up section. And you just pull it up as soon as the public is gone. So it's not an eye hazard. In some cases, we've used glass, tempered glass. There's many solutions. But we cannot be putting people a story above a raked pile of seats with only protection to here. Because if they fall over, it's really easy. So the laws are there, and you can't change the laws, and you really can't get variances for a lot of these. You have to figure out design ways around them. There's another way in which we make the balcony extend so that it now becomes a building element, and the lights go in here. Because how many times have you seen balconies with a pole, a light pole in front of the balcony? So that in order to change the gels, you'd have to be hanging over that rail, reaching out and trying to change the gel on that light with nothing between you and the next world but somebody holding your coat. That doesn't make any sense. That's over. Can't design them like that anymore. You have to have a method now that doesn't happen. And you've got a nice, safe, dead-hung theater here. You've got a really good chance to work with some stuff. The worst theater, I can't tell you the college, but it's famous. And I went and they said, well, we have two theaters, and one of them had some problems, but the other one they said is kind of small, but it has a grid. I said, oh, really? Oh, yes. I said, I'd like to see it. So we went up, and sure enough, above the stage, there was this wire grid. Springy. What the hell is this? You know. Oh, well, it's what do they call it? Playground fence. You know, that wire fence? It's not even load rated. And they had tied it in between the beams. And they were dropping stuff down between. They said, well, once we had a chorus of 10 people up here. You know, be careful. You can't do that. Just because you know, get an idea doesn't mean it's a good idea. So everything has to be load rated. And now there are standards. If you're going in to be a rigger, there is a course you can take and a certification you can get from a group called Entertainment Services Technology. We now want certified riggers on our job. They have one for theater rigging, one for arena rigging. And there's also, this group has a theater electrician test. What should a theater electrician actually know about electricity? Be very good to standardize that. And so that's been done. So there are standard setters out there. People are working in the business to try to make this better. Because up until now, what we had in theater was one person learning by the seat of his pants from somebody else who learned by the seat of his pants. And that's not good. You need, again, organized, real training from people who really have experience and know the laws. Because theater is dangerous. Look at the kind of power you have in theater in terms of electricity. That is not a blender. Okay? So you need to know what you're doing, and you got heights. So, any other questions? Yes. Nice and loud.
For us who aren't really the typical studio artist or theater major. What do you say to like graphic designers? Like, what do we have to worry about?
Well, you're lucky because, you know, the computer graphic stuff is just, I mean, we actually have computer graphics as a category in our union. And they get big bucks, big work. It's a really good field to get into. So, you know, it's a lot cheaper if they can do the graphics your way. Much, much cheaper. So you picked a good type of work to get into. And it's kind of nice because the only thing that you're dealing with usually is you know, EMF and those things we're not too sure about in terms of electronic devices and so on. But it's not the same kind of risk as those people over there are taking, so this is good. However, when you come on to your first big movie location as a graphic designer, you're going to find that your place to do this work is going to be a construction trailer. And maybe that will have ventilation, and then maybe it won't. And you don't know what kind of conditions. And maybe there'll be a bathroom, maybe there won't. You know, again, you gotta know your rights. You gotta make sure they treat you right, because it's a dangerous world. The worst thing that happens in New York is the city leases buildings for $1. Abandoned buildings. Now, do you know how much real estate is worth in New York? So if it's abandoned, it's usually a really good reason. So these places where they will set you up, full of lead, asbestos, structural hazards, dangerous places. And that's why, again, I say get into a union, and so you don't have to complain. You call the office and let them yell at us. We like it. Okay, so we make sure, because, well, I'll even tell a story about Disney. You know, the mouse is a rat. We all know that. But they leased an abandoned theater to film something called August Rush. And the theater, I went in to check it, and there was asbestos and lead problems, but also when I saw around the carpet where the beams were, I saw little cement chips. That is a really bad sign. That is a sign that there is something happening between the beams and the floor. So I said, I'm not a structural engineer, but in my report I said, you need a structural engineer's report before you even go in there. Well, on a Saturday, when they knew I wasn't working, they brought their crane in anyway. And it went straight down through the first floor and into the basement. Took out all the electrics on the way out. Crash. They said it was spectacular. So I had one of my nya moments. But this is the kind of place. So these are not safe places that they're going to put you. Just because you're a graphic designer used to sitting in a neat, quiet little place with a computer doesn't mean that they're going to hang you off some weird place in an abandoned building. So just always know, always keep your wits about you in the business. And again, always know that your employer suffers no downside to killing you. None. They have no penalties, whatever. So you take care of yourself. And if you come to New York, I expect you to call on me. Okay. Anyone else have a question? Yes.
As far as like theater safety and stuff like that, off stage, we cake ourselves with makeup and oftentimes use like Ben Nye products. Is there anything like extremely toxic in those, or anything that we should be watching out for in terms of that?
Well, yeah, many of them we know very little about, but there's one we're starting to know more about. Titanium dioxide is the common white base in most makeups. It's now in nanoparticle size. Do you know what that means? That means it is something like 0.01 or smaller microns in diameter. They begin to behave almost like gases. We don't really know exactly what they do, but they put them in the products anyway. So we're not 100% certain. Now, there's been a few studies in Europe that show, at least on normal skin, they don't seem to penetrate really badly. Because some nanoparticles go right through your skin like it wasn't there. But these don't seem to. They do primarily ride in those surface layers of your skin. But they don't know anything about what it does if you've got damaged skin or dermatitis or cuts or whatever. So be careful. And the other thing that you need to keep always in mind is the FDA never approves any makeup ingredient by inhalation. Ever. Airbrush makeup is technically misbranded. If they ever want to push it, they're going to find out it's just illegal. Because they only approve it for use on the skin. And they have very strict regulations. This is skin, here. Around the eyes, there's a different standard. The stuff that goes on your lips, there's a different standard. And you can't just put anything anywhere. You need to know what it's approved for. The FDA approvals are very limited. And none of them are approved for snorting. So when you see those people at the USITT meetings and everything, where they'll pick some good-looking girl and they'll turn her into with warts and scary-looking stuff all over her and airbrush the heck out of her, that's not legal. You don't want any part of that. You want to make sure that doesn't happen. And if you need backup for that, get in touch with me. I have a nice data sheet on it to make sure that they don't do that to you. But makeup is a really interesting area because we also have, hair extensions and we have stuff. Just never use anything that has natural rubber in it. There was another death in England recently from hair extensions. If rubber, do we all know we're talking natural rubber is a potent sensitizer. Causes huge allergies. There's been 28 documented deaths from exposure to rubber latex medical items. And there's over 1,000 anaphylactic shock reactions that have been documented from exposure to natural rubber. And I don't know, maybe I shouldn't bring this up, but what else are all the health departments telling us all to do with rubber latex? Yeah, I won't say anything other than you could come and you could go. So watch out for the makeup. Be careful. Any other questions?
What about photography if you're using an actual black room with the chemicals?
Oh boy, yeah. Well, you don't have that here. No, and that has all changed like you can't believe. And most of those changes are from EPA. You know how we used to always have a sink? And then there was a shelf here, and then there were the big containers with the spigots so that we could fill the trays and then dump them back and da-da-da-da-da. You can't do that. Can't do that. Because if the used fix, breaks the spigot or something or dumps, it goes right straight to the drain. They'll cite you for that, for even having it there. So now we design them so that they're on the floor, in containment trays. We pump them up into the trays, siphon them back. All the silver has to be done, and gosh, help you if you're doing what we call historic or alternate processes, where they use things like real silver nitrate, or the cyanotypes, the ferric cyanides. Whoa, you wouldn't believe the cost of disposal of those things. It's just huge. So it's very difficult to do that kind of work now. And I'm sad because, I'm going to tell you, I'm still shooting 35 millimeter. I like it, thank you very much. I'm an old lady, and Fuji is still making it. And I like the look. And when I did expert witness in a trial against the theater, and I took the pictures on the inspection of the theater. And when the lawyers blew up the big copies in order to put them as exhibits. It was those nice 35 millimeters that made the best, blow-ups. So, I'm not so sure I'm going to quit. I'm still using slides. It's really ridiculous. But so I'm sad to see this go. But we have to completely change the way we design the darkroom, and the cost is huge if you do it correctly.
So, but what about like breathing the chemicals or like touching them with your hands? Because you have to dip your hands in them.
You've never heard of gloves?
Well, with gloves, but
Gloves and tongs. I know. It's like kissing through saran wrap. But you need to do it. You need to do it. Well, what we design are tables. If I was to make a cross section of the table, it looks like this. And there's a main down here. And there's a slot. So you put your trays here, and air is going in here, across the top of the water, so that there isn't anything. If you're standing here, you're not breathing anything. If you want to see some of those, we have, there's some at the School of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. There's some closer to here. There's one at Carleton College, one at St. Olaf's. So you can see those draw right from the top of the baths. And again, not cheap. Those are about $30,000, $40,000 just to fabricate out of steel, out of stainless. But it can be done. And there are schools that have the money and want to do it. And I say, great, go ahead. But what I don't like to see is these schools who say, we've got a little space left under the stairs, let's put in a dark room, and then you find some little hellhole and there's chemicals all over the place. That's not how it should work. Yeah, any other? Yes.
So how bad is it with what effects can it have on you with darkroom chemicals if you spent 5 days a week, at least 2 hours in a dark room where you didn't have things like that?
Well, you going to try to explain what's wrong with you? Well, the major thing that you're smelling is two chemicals. It's acetic acid, and that's coming from the vinegar-like material, and that's a strong respiratory irritant. And the other one is sulfur dioxide. And unfortunately, I don't seem to get photographers in their books to understand. I co-authored a book called Overexposure, Health Hazards in Photography, and it explains the various chemicals in the various products, including all of the alternative processes and historic processes. But the major pollutant comes from the sulfite preservatives in all of those solutions. Because when you put those in water, they kick off sulfur dioxide. Now, sulfur dioxide is a very interesting air pollutant, and it causes not only powerful irritation because it mixes with the water in your lung to form sulfurous acid, it also is a sensitizer. It's known to provoke allergic and asthmatic reactions. So when sulfur dioxide from factories goes up, we see the asthma and related problems also go up. And so there you are in the darkroom generating this stuff and snorting it. And the longer you're exposed, the more likely you are to develop those problems. When you look at the chemicals in developing, they're really weird. And some of those will cause some very odd types of dermatitis. Dermatitis types that we don't see in hardly anybody else we see in photography people. So, you really want to kind of try to keep it off your hands as much as you can and still enjoy your work. And you need that ventilation. Without the ventilation, it's just really a bad idea altogether.
Are you guys building secret darkrooms in your dorm?
No.
I'm just curious. All the darkroom questions.
My high school had a really small darkroom.
Okay.
Just wondered.
Well, yeah, because high school teachers love to do the process and you watch the image come up. You know, there's something kind of magic about that. And so we sometimes see, but that's a bad idea on the part of your teacher. Sorry, it is, without the right ventilation. Any other questions? It's hard to see. Aha!
What about if you end up working in a theater that hasn't been thoroughly cleaned in years?
Join the club and meet the president. Oh, man. Do you know, I think you could probably get the dust in a theater and with careful analysis identify productions for 15 years going. Because every production leaves something. And, you know, sometimes there will be a lot of black material and they will touch up with a spray can, and so there's small amounts of black pigment and stuff that end up in the dust. And then the next time they're doing something where they got glitter, and then the next time, you know, somebody has one of these situations where they look at old books and they're blowing the talc off. And I mean, everything, just constantly adding crud to the theater. And then, God help you, you've got an asbestos curtain. And you're raising and lowering that. And it's hanging, and some of them aren't even painted. That's just putting asbestos fibers in there. We see, I did a mesothelioma case on a woman who died of mesothelioma, who worked in 4 theaters on Broadway. So, you know, this is a big problem, what that dust is. And the curtains eventually pick up all that crap. That's a technical term. And then they're supposedly fire retarded. But they pick up so much dust and stuff that they're no longer fire retarded. They would just vroom into flame if you ever put a match to them, because there's just enough dust to keep them burning. So, you know, keeping a theater clean is really important. They really have to kind of get at it, and they need to wet mop whenever they can. They need to use a HEPA vacuum whenever they can, something that will actually catch the fine dust and keep at it. I know there's something, you know, we had this thing even when I was in school, that if you're clean and neat, you'll never be an artist. It just was like you weren't supposed to do that. Your studio was supposed to look like the wreck of the Hesperus, and you should look even worse. And so we sometimes don't consider cleaning and hygiene as we should. And in a theater, it's really important, because every production adds more schmutz to the theater. Yeah. Any other questions? Have we done it? Class? What time is it?
10 to 5.
10 to 5. We got 10 minutes. If you knew what it costs to have me here, you'd find a way to fill those 10 minutes. Yes.
I'm working with polyurethane rubber molds. I know, I didn't even want to bring it up. I feel guilty anyways. But after I mix them in like these disposable buckets, where is it best to dispose of these disposable buckets?
I really don't care. I am much more concerned about you because I'm going to give you the world's fastest lesson. I mentioned TLVs before, and they are the amount of substance that a healthy adult worker should be able to tolerate for 8 hours, 40 hours a week on the job. And you use them to look at the comparison. If we take gases and vapors, you don't know what all of this means, but I'm just going to do a fast and dirty something here to just convince you why you want to not do that anymore. Okay, if you look at carbon dioxide, you're allowed to have 5,000 parts per million in your steel factory before the TLV is exceeded. These are TLVs. If we look at acetone, you're allowed to have 500 parts per million. Your Gamsol that you use in painting, 300. If you're dumb enough to use terpenoid or mineral spirits, 100. If you're really dumb and you use turpentine, that's 20. If you don't use your head and you heat wax for any reason, you get acrolein. 0.1, and there's no respirator for it. But if you use two-component urethane, you're dealing with TDI or MDI or one of the other isocyanates, and that is here. You can't do it. It is so toxic. It is just, there's no respirator approved for it. Find another way.
Can she do it in the spray booth?
If she does it in the spray booth, no problem. Okay. If you can keep it all going on in the spray booth, nothing out there, and leave it there for a day, because you don't, we now know that that takes time to cure. And when you handle it for the first time, wash your hands right away. We know some of those isocyanates migrate to the surface. We've seen that in the auto industry now. So be careful. This stuff is really bad. So once you've got the buckets and it's done, that if the reaction has gone to completeness, it doesn't really matter. The difficulty with any time you see part A, part B in the word urethane is this. If it is not mixed properly, in the right proportions and completely mixed, that polymer will off-gas isocyanates forever. Okay? There was a building in Boston. The contractor got a job to waterproof, and he did it with a two-component urethane, and he mixed it wrong. They had to tear down the historic courtroom. There was no way to save it. No one could work in that building. Years after the project was done. You don't know how really hazardous this stuff is. So when it says part A, part B in urethane, spray booth or nothing else. And really read and make sure you mix it right and you treat it right and all that good stuff. You keep it off your skin. We have 2 workers disabled in New York and 2 here in Chicago from two-component urethanes. You don't want to be one of them. Nah.
Can you talk about the approved materials lists?
Which?
Approved materials lists.
The approved material list?
Yeah. Explain what that is.
I don't know what it is either.
You said you get a list of materials that are allowed in the building?
Oh, yes. You see, because there is an OSHA regulation that says, it's called hazard communication, and it requires a list of products. And those products, they have to have material safety data sheets on each one of them. And you cannot bring in anything that is not on that list. You cannot do it. It's illegal. Now, if you find something you dearly love that is not on the list of products that you're using in your class and that they approve of, then your teacher will probably ask you to go to the computer and get a material safety data sheet on that product from the manufacturer. If that's hard to get, that's a clue right there. You don't want that product. Something's wrong with that manufacturer. You should be able to go right on their site, look for MSDS, download it, and you're done. And then you can bring it in and they can evaluate it and see if it's something that can be used safely and where it can be used, and then do it. But you cannot just bring in willy-nilly anything into the building. Even if you're a graduate student or working in your own little cubicle, you cannot do this. You see, if you're in your own studio that you've rented, you are allowed to kill yourself however you choose. But as soon as you're in a school where there's employees and employers, OSHA regulations come into being, and now everything has to come under these rules, and everything has to be properly labeled, everything has to have a material safety data sheet, and all of that paperwork has to be there. There can be no mystery products in a school. You can say, well, I know what it is. We don't care. Does the fire department know what it is when they come in? Does EMS know what it is when they look at the label? Just look at every label in your area, and if somebody coming into the building for the first time would be confused by what was actually in that container, that's illegal. You need the actual name and reference to the material safety data sheet or the hazards on there too, all that. It's got to be there. Okay? So I know that, I'm sure you just love this law, but it really is the way it has to be. Ordinarily, what teachers do is they have a list of products by brand name that you can buy and use. But if you want to use something outside of that, you got to negotiate. And you got to get the MSDS and let them look at it. Make sense? No, it doesn't, I guess, but that's it. That's the law. Well, I've had a good time, and I've gotten all my anger out. I'll go home nice and limp and happy. And I hope that some of you will figure out that this is kind of interesting to do. And maybe some of you will add an extra component to what you're doing in the arts. Thinking about the safety, or maybe about the environment. Finding some way to actually do art without poisoning as much of the environment as you would have otherwise. And if I can help in any way, don't hesitate to get in touch. Okay? As long as I'm still on this planet, I'm on your side. Okay? Thank you.